Right, I'm here for another episode of Thorin's Big Brains, which is, of course, in this case, my League of Legends talk show. My guest for this one is going to be Keire, who you might have seen a couple of episodes back I had. He's someone who doesn't have a camera, doesn't even have a Twitter. So that's how you know, just as you saw in that episode, if you can decipher the Scottish accent he has. And listen, I'll just say this. I can't do a Scottish accent, but I will just say it. If you're American, just reset the filters to 007, Sean Connery. Just, it's not even vaguely close, by the way. But it's basically might give you a win, is all I'm saying. And by the way, that's how you know R.I.P. Sean Connery, a real fucking man. The way you know he was a legend is because you know the other actors in Hollywood, right? The best ones are all the ones who are like Marlon Brando and fucking Robert De Niro, and Daniel Day-Lewis. They're all like, I'm a method actor. Oh, what do you mean? Daniel Day-Lewis, who's that? I am this character. You know, they do all that shit when they go in. Sean Connery would take roles that are just like, I am a fucking Spaniard. And he would just speak in a Scottish accent. Like, he never made any attempt to actually, in fucking Intouchable. He's just unreal. Like, he was just such a boss. You watch the movie, this is how you know he's a great actor, and you just go, don't even give a fuck that he's just doing a Scottish accent. I believe he is actually Ramirez, a Scottish character in the movie Highlander, while a fucking Frenchman plays a Scottish character and fucks all the accents up. So that's how you know he was good. Christopher Lambert was not that good, but it was a good movie, right? That's a long way of saying Keire is someone who, because he's, in theory, just an enthusiast, theory, just a fan, he can actually give you fairly raw opinions. If you don't know, in the last episode, he said that Tactical was essentially a moron, or it might be in Kazi, one of the two. Either way.
Both of them.
Yeah, there you go. Just both of them, yeah. Why split differences, right? So, okay, we're going to get into this one because obviously at the time that we've recorded this, the two World semi-finals have both been played. They were both actually 5-game series. We'll talk about maybe they were bangers or not, because I'm not one of those people who thinks the second they play that shit Silver Scrapes, it means everything's a banger. And I'll also say this, a classic flaw in esports is that they will always say like a series that goes the full distance is a banger, whereas usually it's like games are bangers. You know, there's not that many series that like every game's a fucking banger, even some of the great ones in history. So let's start out, Keire, here, which is, let's just go in order that they went in. So we had the all LCK matchup, which was basically the LCK summer final just replayed. And this time it was even closer. Like, people might remember they were actually fairly surprised how competitive T1 made that previously. This time it was a 5-game series. Let's just start at the top. Right, coming in, I didn't hear anyone who actually predicted T1 to win this. So I just want to know, what were your thoughts on like how competitive it was going to be? Like, were you someone who actually, by this point in the tournament, thought T1 could win this series?
I don't think I think this is the peak where they could bring it to. This is like the peak, the zenith of where they could take this like series to. Because literally every single game they had to just draft the winning bot lane matchups, the winning 2v2 matchups, and they had to just run with it and try and attack DK's biggest weakness, which is the bot lane. And I think T1, with their scaling style that they were executing at Worlds, this is as far as they could basically make it go. And
now, go on.
No, that's it.
Now, listen, obviously, if anyone watched the games, it's not a terrible strategy. That is what a lot of people speculated is the one kind of weak point on the roster of Damwon. And if you just look which games T1 won, you can see Gumayushi has good games and he has the matchups, right? So my question is this. When I was coming in, like when I was talking to Zabatine about these semi-finals, I said the problem is it's obviously not as simple as just saying they're not as good at that position to attack them. Because first of all, when you do that in the draft, that might mean that they just give amazing picks to Canyon and Showmaker, for example, for you to get your picks. So did you actually think, like, you obviously, as you alluded to, it was the strategy to go for? How effective do you think it was overall?
I think once they started taking like the Jin away themselves, it was like very effective. They had to permaban Aphelios like the full series, but obviously the game they gave it away was like the bait pick because they set up the draft to abuse the Aphelios being picked up. But I really think the ADC hero pool wasn't actually that crazily important. I think It was the support pool that was the defining feature. Don't know what Damwon were thinking playing this fucking Malphite. This Maokai. It just looked terrible. And then a lot of the other games are basically down to how much could Korea leverage his supports agency, like the Lulu, the Zillion, things like that, to save Gumayushi from like being like dived onto because he was getting a lot of like T1's resources.
Yeah, that's the other thing to point out. Look, I obviously don't think Ghost's that good a player. It always sounds like I'm super flaming him because I just like, put it this way, I want people to understand categorically, I don't care how many LCK Worlds this guy wins, he's not actually like a champion in terms of like the best at his role. Now, certainly in every team, there are people who are the worst player on a team who are sacrificial members sometimes. Sometimes for ADC, that just means you kind of go even or you just do your job in a team fight and you're kind of a third or secondary carry, depending on the draft. But one thing I will say is I think people actually have almost unfairly tagged Ghost with some of the criticism that probably is more deserved from Beryl. Like, Beryl's the player who seems like he almost has to rely on off-meta picks or weird shit. And sometimes when you consider how great Korean supports can be, and by the way, even just LPL supports, if you saw Worlds, like, I feel like this is the guy who was probably the bigger part of the weakness. So, as you say there, support pick obviously became a big deal. Whereas on the contrast, as much as Gumayushi's up-hyped as this talent and all the rest of it, I think most people actually think, in theory, the best player in Team 1 is Keire, because he might be the best Korean support, right?
Yeah, like, Korea's crazy. Like, it was someone highlighted it to me because I was talking with someone about Ming being the best like support player, but I hadn't watched that much of Korea, and he went, right, go watch Korea, and this guy is insane. And because this enchanter meta has came around and we've moved away from the engage stuff, I think that's part one of his like specialities, and he is so good at these like particular heroes and like Thresh as well. I think Nami and like Thresh are basically almost like permabanned or like couldn't be picked the entire series, along with Yumi as well. So there was this massive pinching on the support pool, and you've seen what effect it had. You had one team picking Maokai and you had the other team picking Zillion. Basically, champions we've basically never seen all like worlds year round, and then they're just finally showing up because the two teams have been compressing the support pool so much.
Yeah, by the way, I will just say it. I know it's going to be confusing. That sounds like when you say Korea and Keire, it's the same thing. But don't worry. Don't worry. All I'll tell you is this. I once did an interview back in StarCraft 2, which was really embarrassing because basically I only realised about fucking 4 questions in that like the guy kept thinking when I said the word Korea, as in like, you know, what you've done in your job, that he thought I was saying Korea because the guy was Korean and this fucking guy was just translating it to him. And obviously I'm getting all these like weird ass answers back. Like, what the fuck is that? Why do you keep going on about his home country? Like, I'm not even asking, you know, I'm like, over your career, it's just asking that. So don't worry, that'll happen. But anyway, this is what I want to revert to, okay? Before we get into any other aspect, right? Top lane was another area that I personally found was going to be very interesting in this series because as much as everyone says at the moment, at least in the teams left, like, yeah, Khan is the best. Obviously, he brings that whole fucking baggage from the past. Yet I will say it doesn't really look like it's shown up so far. Like, I noticed actually a lot of the analysts got really hot on Canna this tournament, actually. It feels like he got a lot of props, where if you look last year, I always thought he was a bit overrated then. I mean, I thought Korean tops were pretty weak back then. What did you think of top lane matchup in the series? It looked like it was a lot of the champions you expect to see, but I will say, Khan pulled the fucking Xiaohu and brought the Lucian.
Yeah, so that was like a quite like good thing to see, because I think that's like 2 games he's like played on it, and he looks pretty competent, so you're always going to be able to threaten with it in draft. I actually thought Canna, outside of like Xiaohu, was actually like the best performing top laner. Then it would be like Can. But in this series, I think Canna had some really bad games. Some really like terrible games, making very poor decisions. I think it was Canna's own Jace. It was Canna's own Jace game where he like suicide and died into like Showmaker and basically threw the entire game like on that one thing, because randomly in the series for like 2 games, T1 decided that they were going to play the top side and try and win that way rather than continuing to do what had already been winning them games. And when they were playing next to Canna, he wasn't protecting his leads. It wasn't, the gold that was being pumped into him just wasn't anywhere near as efficient as it was when it was on Guma. I feel like he had a really underperforming series, but in context, he hadn't actually really played against many people to like push him a bit further. Yes. And I think he wasn't able to, like, the natural advantages he'd been getting and being a better laner against even people like Flange and stuff, Can basically like took them away, and so you now need to get Owner to come up to his lane and fix the lane for him or gank from him to be able to get an advantage.
Yes. And here's the thing, because I actually do know a little bit about your particular accent, mate. I could make a mega tongue twister for you where it's like Canna, but he is a canny lad, you know, like I could make a fucking next level one for you if I wanted, but we won't, we'll move on. So, like, here's the question though, obviously, let's be real, the entire narrative of this tournament, because T1 at this point in time, in terms of the people who remain from the championship eras at Worlds, is Faker. Obviously, it goes without saying that was the main storyline people built up, because they either want it to be like, oh, Faker's going to win another Worlds. By the way, you are on insane copium if that was really your take, and or you are Fionn, in which case, shout out, hi. Or the angle I noticed most people were going with is like, you know, is Showmaker the next Faker, and is kind of like he going to become the next dynastical player and win a bunch of Worlds, right? So what did you think of mid-lane matchup? Because I noticed that this was the one where before quarters, the whole storyline was it doesn't even matter if Chovy's a better laner because Faker's sort of figured out how to play to the side lanes, and he's kind of like being sort of like fucking season 4 high or something. It's not about lane. But I say after the Chovy series against Hanwha, a lot of people were like, maybe he can even just lane. How did you think the mid lane matchup went?
So apart from I think one game where I think it was maybe the very first game. I'm not too sure. I think it was the first game. Showmaker styled, in my opinion, all over Faker. Basically, Showmaker is like the win condition for his team, and you can see it with the champion picks. Faker's playing like these scaling picks that he likes, like the Rise and the Azir, and every other Showmaker is getting LeBlanc, I think, and Syndra, and he is just absolutely styling on the map. He is killing so many like champions, like 8-9 kills a game. He's like not dying, not giving his leads away. They're drafting these really, really threatening 2v2, 2v1 mid lane picks with the Lee Sin and the LeBlanc, and they're just barreling down on to Faker's head. I actually think Faker had quite a poor series, to be honest. I think he actually he was really bad in those last two games. The Rise game where he just kept on burning his flash and just getting ran at and just through the entire series, and then the Azir game where he's playing Azir into Zoe with like all this long range poke and he just isn't going to get to team fight. I understand why he wants these like heroes, because team fighting is like one of the last areas where Faker is like somewhat elite because he is just such a creative and veteran player.
Sure.
But Showmaker is just what Faker was years ago. He is the person that you give him the LeBlanc pick, you give him the picks with agency, and he just consumes the entire map. Your map just shrinks, your jungle quadrants shrink, and he just takes over the full game.
Yeah, I mean, that was another area I had my concerns about this series, is that as much as that strategy sounds great, like, oh, just play like inside out on the map and it'll just help the other players in the team. It's like, first of all, like realistically, Kanna's not better than Khan necessarily as an overall player. So like you've really only got one lane that you could potentially super duper get ahead. And then also, like, as you say, like if the strength of Faker's in team fighting, like Showmaker might be the best team fighting mid in the world. Like it's a pretty decent shout at this point in time. And then also, because this is the part I think people overlooked, that style sounds great, but you have to have the champions that you can do that with if you're Faker. And first of all, there was no TF in this series because T1 themselves had to ban it when they were on that side. And then secondly, the kinds of champions you had to take, Lysandra, Rise, like you're just leaving up basically, as you say, some of the picks that like Showmaker isn't just going to like win he's going to smash you. Like you saw some of those games, mate. I'd love to go and check how many kills he had in that series. He was having some bonkers games, right? So you kind of teased it there. Like, obviously, we don't yet know if Damwon wins Worlds. They've certainly won a bunch of LCK. You know, he's actually someone where people forget this, right? But if you ever watch any other games, I mean, I'm sure you can like relate to this from watching other esports games. I feel like a really big mistake people make is when someone has a resume like Faker does, it seems like, well, it's impossible to ever catch up to that because of how hard it is. But this is the part people miss, is because only one set of players in a team win the championship and the other ones don't. Every time you win the championship, you also deny your competition the championship. And so if you start winning a whole bunch in a row, you can catch up really fast. I mean, the analogy I would give for League fans would be, remember how utterly insurmountable TSM's lead in terms of LCS championship seemed at one point in time. But all of a sudden, Team Liquid's like right there with them. At one point in time, even CLG wasn't that far behind when they won a couple. You know, Cloud9's won a whole bunch. Like, as I say, when you start winning them, as hard as they are to win, if you are the dominant force, you can catch up real fast. So Showmaker, if he wins this Worlds, he's already going to start actually be in a very close position in terms of resume. And then obviously the eye test takes on, we start having this discussion, right? Without skipping too far ahead even beyond this tournament, do you actually think, in terms of as an individual player, as a mid laner, do you think he actually can really challenge Faker and go for like greatest player ever in League of Legends?
It's really difficult because it really comes down to like your own like criterias of like what you value in your player, or what you value in a player.
What would yours be then? What kind of things do you look for?
See, because like there's like loads of years I think Knight's been the best player, like maybe for like the past 3 years. I think Knight has literally, I don't care that he's not been to Worlds. Like every single year, I think he's like arguably the best player in the world. He never wins Worlds. He's not even winning LPL, but he is just so that unbelievably fantastical. But Showmaker is my other alternative. If it's not Knight, it's Showmaker. And it's not even like he's doing it with like these stacked teams. His bot lane's absolute shit. It's terrible. So the amount of times he has to execute in a game, in a series to win it, it's so consistent. It really is like Faker in like 2013, and when he had his run in Worlds and OGN, where he had to just be exceptional every single game. And it was kind of ruined this year when they done all that lane swapping shit in the regular season, but which has kind of tainted that a little bit because he started fanning around. But he is just really, really good. I think seriously, with the same way you discussed Rookie, another 2 years or a year and a half of like this kind of level of performance, I genuinely think you could put him in there and start really rationally talking about him being the best.
Yes, and I'll even say as well, like if people know, obviously I laid my criteria out when I did that whole Western GOAT series. One thing I think is very underrated is we're talking about like the greatest player ever. Realistically, we're only counting like prime years. It doesn't matter if you hang on and you just have a bunch where you're all right or you're like the 10th best mid laner. So to me, I have to say, I'm beyond season 7. I don't give a fuck what Faker did. I don't care that he won some LCK titles because, you know, Griffin and Gen.G choked and, you know, by the way, he had some fucking stacked teams those years. Go back and look, like he had like top 3 players at every position at times. So I personally think if you're looking at this discussion we're having, you're talking season 3, season 5, season 6, and then parts of season 7, and particularly obviously Worlds. So at that point in time, people do the thing where they think it's Faker's whole career. It's like, look, no one else was playing from 2013 except Rookie, who's basically in this discussion. So yeah, at that point in time, no one can do it. But I agree with you. If you look at prime years, it's not that many more years till someone like Showmaker can be in the convo. With that said, like I said earlier, it is still really fucking hard to do this for another year. It's hard to win more LCK. It's hard to win more Worlds. It's really hard. So yeah, never overestimate that, of course. So okay, what about this? Now that we kind of put the T1 thing to bed, what I want to ask you is this. Did this series being so close make you think that Damwon is not as dominant as they seemed before? Remember, before this semi-finals, dude, people were having that discussion like Monty T's, like, will this be the first team ever to win undefeated Worlds? Like, that was a real conversation people were having. Now, obviously, that can't even be the case. They can't even be the one that wins 15-1 or whatever it would be in the modern day because they've lost 2 games. Did this series being so close in any way make you concerned for Damwon in the final, or have they been overrated as a team? Where are they at for you?
So, that when I was talking about T1 on the previous show, I was saying how if T1 won a puncher's chance to beat teams that are much better than them, it's all about their bot lane. And they arguably have, with the actual eye test, by far the best bot lane at this like tournament.
Yes. And
they really, really executed it as far as you could take it and go with it, and it still wasn't enough because Damwon are just that good a team. It did give me a doubt, but this is Damwon getting attacked in their absolute weakest point on the map, and they're getting attacked by the best thing you can possibly bring that we've seen at this tournament, and they still managed to hold it. I was actually more impressed with them than anything else.
Okay.
They've managed because their Game 5 draft was amazing. It was an absolute masterpiece draft to like put away T1 in the series.
Yeah, I mean, I'll obviously say I also thought they showed like pretty decent poise. You know, they didn't seem rattled by it. It's also one of those scenarios where, again, as long as you get to the last game, if you have a really dominant 5th game, I don't give a fuck that it was 3-2. You're still the better team. All that matters. There's the problem. Yeah, if you want to talk most dominant teams ever, you've got to stomp people. But in my opinion, being a champion is just about getting through by any means necessary. You can sneak through, you can smash them. Who gives a fuck? Let's talk about then an angle I want to discuss, which goes like this. Before we go to the other semi, I thought an interesting discussion we could have, in light of the fact that if people don't know, Dota 2 is your main game that you watch. You're actually one of the weird fucking alien hybrids that somehow watches Dota 2 and League of Legends. I know almost no one else that exists like that in the world, by the way, which is why it'll be an interesting discussion, because I've enjoyed watching Dota 2, but just as a fan/enthusiast. I've done very little content in the game. In fact, if people don't know, some of the interviews I've done, basically those Dota pros, like, just privately requested I do the interview, so it does somewhat say what a dog shit fucking content creation scene Dota 2 has, right? Not least because apparently all the people on Reddit hate me, but if you've seen Dota 2, that's a very good sign. That's a compass that I must be a man of fucking character and doing some good work. If you look at the dog shite they like Sir Action Slacks, that's right, I said it. I fucking guard your sacred cow. I said that he's not funny. I mean, listen, he is funny, but unintentionally and largely to look at. Oh, actually, I just went a bit too raw there. I didn't really, by the way. I don't give a flying fuck. What's he going to do? Say something shit and then just do something plastic with his face. Right. That was pretty harsh. Right. Here we go, Keire. He's all right. Whatever. He's just, basically, it's like if Travis just had an on-camera role. You see what I did there?
No,
right.
No, that's
Right. Here's the thing, though. What I was trying to say was, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Right. In Dota 2, though, one thing that I've always found fascinating is, first of all, if you think in League, people who've been watching the last 2 or 3 years, like, wow, it's so exciting that you can flex champions. You know fucking nothing. In Dota, you can essentially flex a lot of heroes, which are the names of champions, into, like, in theory, every fucking lane or role, depending on the time period and meta. And in fact, one of the things I've always found very cool, it's why it makes those it's why basically drafts 10 times more interesting in Dota. Like, if you ever go and watch those Poppy or fucking PPD explanations of their draft, like, it's like listening to some, like, genius chess master, like, explain what he's doing and what he's going to do to his opponent on like a 10 steps deep fucking anime plotline level, because they can literally even draft things into, like, a support role, for example, that's normally just a carry hero. And so as a result, you don't know where they're going in the draft, and they have some super next level reason as to why they're doing it. So one of the things that's always fun about Dota 2 is when TI comes around, it's always the question of either has every hero been used? I will say there's a lot more games played in TI, obviously, or how many heroes don't end up getting played. And typically the number that don't end up getting played is very small, actually. So on that topic, like, what are your thoughts in terms of how much hero diversity there is in Dota 2? And then maybe you can give us your thoughts contrasting when you, like, go out of the Dota 2 mindset and you look at League. I would say this Worlds, for example, was one where we came in the summer from, wow, it's wide open, to it seemed like, especially by the time we got to playoffs, it's pretty restricted. Like, you kind of knew which the strongest ones are and what the counters were. And, you know, there was something of a flow chart on these drafts, right?
Yeah, that's a thing that I've always found very, like, frustrating in League of Legends. I've always felt that, like, drafting tactics and stuff has always been poor. It's, like, been very much further behind. Because obviously, like, the core mechanic that causes this is Dota 2 has a much different philosophy on how to, like, balance the game to the Riot devs. People believe very contrasting things, and so you end up with very contrasting games. I actually do think League players get themselves caught up in a crazy amount of, like, meta, like, thinking of, like, heroes, like, cannot be good or has to be good.
Yes.
Because, for example, Graves has basically been untouched. All the items that Graves buys have been absolutely untouched. The heroes that he's good against, like Aurelia, Jace, Camille, they've all been in the meta all year round, and Graves was never picked in, like, spring or summer. Yes. But he could have been picked this entire year. There's, like, no reason in why Graves couldn't have been picked in this entire split. So it's kind of nice to see stuff like that. You've obviously got Tryndamere mid, a little bit coming in. So I feel like there is a lot of things to be learned in League of Legends in terms of, like, champion pool and diversity and stuff like that. But sometimes League of Legends also has... You can, for example, you have LeBlanc, and a lot of people think right now that one of the counters to LeBlanc is Lissandra. But Lissandra's just a shit hero. She's just terrible. Yes. She's absolutely awful. The only thing she does is, like, she's good against LeBlanc, but she's just fucking bad. You would always rather have the LeBlanc in your team and the other person has the Lissandra. Because, like, the LeBlanc's got way more agency. It can absolutely carry games from unbelievable positions. Lissandra doesn't do that. Lissandra just makes LeBlanc worse. That is literally Lissandra's role. So It's really, really, really hard. I feel like I don't play enough League to know, but I really do feel like if you go out and you look up like the one tricks and stuff like that, you could find a lot of like meta counters and ways to express certain heroes in drafts. That was one of the great things about G2 when they had pipe and they could like flex it into like all four roles, because everyone in the team knew how to use it, and then they would all use it a different way if it was like support, top and stuff, and obviously perks with these mages. But once that G2 team collapsed, no other team even like identifies or has that same colour to them in the global meta right now. And so people are telling you, oh, well, you can't do it. Well, people were telling me you couldn't do it, and then G2 done it. So I feel like there is a lot of space that has gone unexplored.
Now, I will say, obviously, again, these are, as you say, very, very distinct games. Like, there's as much as you might joke about leagues like Babby's fucking version of Dota, they are also pretty divergent games because of the design philosophy, like you say. With that said, though, like, I think if people don't know much about Dota and they want to see an example of what we're talking about, basically, the first time OG won TI, so it would be like 3 TIs ago now, like, they essentially won going completely counter to the meta, and they even did do hero picks that, like, on paper, they lose the draft if you take the nameplates off, but they did picks that were specific. I mean, obviously, some of the ones were like Thoppson, for example. They did picks that were just specific to their players and, crucially, what they wanted to do in the game. Whereas, like, yeah, I think your point about Lysander is very shrewd. Like, as much as that's an example, in fact, maybe we can go into that, where people in leagues still sometimes draft as though lane is the most important. Like, yeah, Lysandra might be a great pick into LeBlanc, but as you say, like, once you reach a certain point in the game, like, you've just got a rubbish fucking champion. And at that point in time, by the way, you're not even just 1v1 playing against LeBlanc anymore. Whereas the guy with the LeBlanc, unless you've completely shot him down, he's just like, right, cheers, now it's time for me to just have a fucking free game, basically, right?
Yeah, it's one of those like crazy things. You're like, and it's something that I find really annoying with like the cast. They'll be talking about like top lane like matchup, and they'll be talking about like, oh, when they go into side lanes. I was like, you do realise like good teams get to decide who matches up against each other in the side lanes. Like they can just like put the mid laner into the top laner and like absolutely ram this guy's throat in. Like they don't have to be like, oh, I've got to go back to that lane where I've been losing all the time. Oh, it's like, no, they don't need to do that. So please stop telling me that's going to happen, because you're doing my fucking head in.
Yes,
it's so strange. I think because we've really regressed. I think, to make a point, because mid lane is so monolithic, because you have TF, Ryze, LeBlanc, and like Aurelia, and basically all other champions are just way worse than those ones, and they are just so much better than anything else you could pick in the game that it's absolutely warping like the game. So you have to deal with that, like those like principles first before you can even get to anything else. That's why I actually think, my personal bias is, I actually think top lane's the best role right now, because if you went down the list of the amount of champions that are like you consider OP, you can't ban them all.
Yeah,
it's impossible. You're always going to be able to get something that's going to have agency and an effect within the game, because you literally cannot throw enough bans at that position.
Yes, I mean, I would even just say, just look at the way the game's played now as well. Why do you think it's so essential? Like, top lane is ganked fucking 24/7. Like, logically, the middle of the map's where it'd be easiest for everyone to go, especially since the support roam has been like, what, 3 or 4 or 5 seasons at this point in time? Like, if mid lane was like the pure insane role it was before, I think you'd see a very different game, right? Let's talk about the other semi-final. So the other semi-final was the EDG Gen.G one, right? Coming in, I actually also found this very interesting. Mainly because of how much discussion after quarters was about, like, LCK is stronger and wow, look at all these Korean teams. And obviously Gen.G and BDD did individually and as a team sort of overperform, impress people. I found a lot of people all of a sudden, they hadn't just built on the other LPL teams, dude. They built on EDG, and I saw people, like a lot of analysts even picking Gen.G, people thinking that they were going to win the series. What were your thoughts coming into this one?
I was actually I thought it would be about this close, because I really had begun to think, and I think you've seen it in the game, these teams are actually quite similar, and basically where their like strengths are and stuff, and things like that, and they step on top of each other's toes a lot, which was quite interesting to see how that was expressed in draft. I definitely thought, just due to current form, EDG would win. Just because of like how the bot lane like match up, and how would they call it, like Flandre is able to just like coast
through like lane and not be like punished, and Gen.G don't know how to play around top lane, then like that's like the perfect team thing for EDG. If Landry's not getting punished for like doing very, very strange things top lane, then like that's already a plus for EDG. Actually, in the server and watching the games themselves, I was really surprised on how close like a lot of the games were and how like evenly matched the teams seemed to be. But it was overall about expectations. It was nice of EDG to figure out that if you take Clid off Lee Sin, he's half as good a player. That was interesting. Yeah, it took them 3 games and then eventually they worked it out.
Yes, I will say if you've watched his career, he's another one of those players where it's like, it wouldn't even matter how in meta that champion is, just don't give him it. Like, that is one of the ones he smurfs on. Now, on the other side though, because if people don't know you are someone who's obviously, I mean, they should guess it by the right comment earlier, you're someone who obviously appreciates the LPL, right? One of the players that, it's, you know, normally the LPL gets like the fucking world's nerf minus like Uzi for some bizarre reason, like one player. The player who's got the fucking world's buff from LPL's JJ, this guy. When I watched him in LPL, he was never going to be like a contender for best jungler. Seems like he's been very good in this tournament.
Well, yeah, he like it was crazy. The series before, EDG won against RNG with Viper and Scout both playing badly. They played terribly basically the whole series, and JJ just was playing like very, very, very well. He like carried the 2 people who were supposed to be his hard carries completely through that series. And then in this Gen.G EDG, the Gen.G EDG series, I thought there was loads of sections of like the game where like he's like, you can see he's like massively overskilled. There's certain aspects to his like team fighting and stuff that are very, very, very elite. He's very, very good mechanically, but there's loads of things because he's a rookie and an amateur that you can see how it's expressed in EDG's gameplay. Because like, yeah, you can't criticize something that doesn't exist. EDG do not set up for Drakes. They literally show up to dragons and they let Clid walk up to the dragon and smite steal it away from them at least once every single game, and they've done it at Baron like numerous times. They do not set up. They don't set up like flank wards, they don't scout and stuff, and it's a real weakness in the game, and I think a lot of that comes from Mako not being on engaged supports and Roman supports because he's having to be put on enchanters. And JJ's just general like inexperience of like warding the map and knowing that, and that's in his role. But for like a guy in his first season who's got very demanding laners like Flandre, I think he's actually doing very, very well.
Right. Obviously, this was another matchup. I mean, one thing, like, if you're a Korean enthusiast is, let's be real, if mid lane, in theory, was the best role historically, all 4 players in the mid lane in the semis were Korean mid laners, although, to be fair, I don't really count Scout as an LCK mid, like, he barely fucking played in the league. But in this particular matchup, Scout against BDD, the other thing is, as you mentioned, Scout didn't look that great in the RNG series, and let's be real, because he was playing against Crying, everyone expected him to just dumpster him. Obviously, BDD actually was, I mean, a lot of people would probably have said he was looking like the second best mid in the tournament. He was looking really good, ahead of, God forbid, Chovy, and then obviously Faker wasn't really even playing for himself most of the tournament. But in this particular series, I thought it was a really interesting contrast, actually, because if you look, basically they just got the champions they like. Like, Scout had his fucking Rise, and BDD had his Azir, and basically it's like they kind of got to do their thing. So how did you think the mid lane matchup went?
So it was really interesting because both EDG and Gen.G, so they had to introduce, how I was talking about previously, there was like the 4, like LeBlanc, Rise and stuff. Well, in this series, Syndra had to be introduced because Syndra is so oppressive into Scout's champion pool and vice versa. And so it actually opened up a lot of like the picks and stuff. So we've actually seen a lot more pick diversity. We've seen like a Zoe game each and a Azir game. Yes. There was even a Victor. We had a Seraphine in the other game. So that, like, because you had this additional ban, you had an extra hero leaking through the pool, and you began to see the mid pool beginning to open up a lot more. So that was really good. This basically series for me was kind of defined by like Scout would have like a crazy monster game where he'd like hard carry loads and loads of team fights, and then BDD would then go and take over a game with Clid and like hard carry the map and take over the game, and then Scout would come back and do it in the next again game. They were basically taking turns around of basically being the best players on the server. Scout's team fighting in this series I think was very, very, very good. There was a lot of games where
if Viper was like misusing his ult or not actually within damage range, and like Scout's taking on like 3 people in the back line and killing 2 of them. It was some really impressive stuff.
Yes, I would say, like, I would characterize it as this was like the heavyweight slug fest, you know, where one guy's blasting one guy with the haymaker and then the other guy hits him with the other one, and, you know, people just get to it. Basically, it was a series for the fans. If you're a fan of mid lane play, you'll just get to watch people just style and just go ham, which I do enjoy watching. Right, what we'll do now is to start to look ahead, and then obviously we'll do the direct matchup of Damwon and EDG. One thing that does concern me is when I made my pick before the let me think. I think it was after maybe RNG played against EDG. I think I did a tweet where I said EDG would win Worlds, and I've explained this previously, so I won't go into it, but just in case you never saw it. Basically, I do think on paper Damwon's the best team and they should win. This was a prediction of like it could. Basically, I was finding a way another team other than Damwon could win. At the time, Team 1 didn't look as strong, and I just think EDG on paper have the pieces to do it. But that's exactly where I want to get into this with you, dude. Because first of all, on paper, Mako and Viper, that's a bot lane that should be able to go against Ghost and Beryl. Also, I agree with you. If I look with the eye test and I take the nameplates off, I would obviously say the T1 bot lane played the best so far in this tournament. So actually, Viper and Mako is kind of just still on paper for me. But on paper, by the way, Viper and Mako is an unfucking real bot lane. I mean, look at that. You've got one of the greatest ever Chinese/LPL support players. And then you've got one of the absolute best Korean and I would say hard carry fucking ADCs in Viper. But I have to say, the on-paper part is what worries me at the moment. I think you hit a key point there in terms of the Mako angle, right? Which is, Mako can't really play some of the champions in this meta at the moment that you typically think of, right? It's not really the kind, like, this isn't what you'd be playing in the LPL. So, basically, is that main condition, the idea that the bot lane could heavily fuck up the Damwon bot lane, is that even here in the tournament going into the final, do you think?
See, this is the crazy thing. Mako is I actually think personally Mako is good at these enchanter supports. I actually don't think he like makes a lot of like mistakes and stuff. But then you have to ask yourself, there's a bigger picture. The team's not good at using them and utilising them.
Right.
EDG fundamentally as a team aren't a good team when Mako's on enchanters. And so you want to, when you're going into this final, they're going to want to, I think you should play the best version of yourself. Know thyself. And you should give yourself the best, like, what you think is the best chance and not be so much of like a meta slave. Because, to be honest, mate, if I'm looking at, I don't really care. Outside of you, mate, I don't really care what Beryl's on. As long as, like, Mako and Viper are going to have good role agency, I think that's the key thing we should be trying to get for as Edward Gaming. So you've seen it in the last game where they actually put Mako on Leona. Would you call it? I think they look perfectly fine, even though, like, the engage supports are going out of the meta. Like, I think it looked great. I would just continue to do that. Have Mako Viper on kill condition bot lanes and have Mako roam a bit more and have him on engage. Because JJ's engages are so much better when he's like the secondary engage angle and Mako's like the lead. So I think it just makes EDG a better version of themselves.
Okay. And obviously you kind of hit it earlier. I have to say, if coming into Worlds, many of us would have said Viper is, you know, the best JDC in the world. I'm sure he would have even been considered the best player in the world overall. I don't feel like I've really seen him at Worlds be that. And I will say, it does feel like, as much as this bot lane angle's been hyped across a bunch of teams, it doesn't seem like ADC's been that impactful over the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. Viper's like shat the bed this world. Like if the EDG went on to win it, like contextually, I wouldn't really see it as like the crowning pinnacle of his individual play. It was more regular season and playoffs and LPL where he was at his best. He's not really came to play at this world. He's been getting caught a lot on really mobile ADCs. He sometimes is getting handed like really icky situations where they had that game where he was the only person engaging on Lucian. It was crazy actually having to watch that where they were engaging with culling on Lucian. But he's been overextending loads, getting very, very greedy. He's not super impressed me, but that could like change like going into the final and Viper could just murder that bot lane by himself. But yeah, he's not been great at all.
Right, one area, obviously, in the semi, you'll notice I didn't bring that lane up because I didn't find it that interesting, was the one hole Gen.G had. It's kind of sad that this was the year where the other players got the shit together and the team looked better. It's obviously top lane just was never good, and they themselves were swapping in Birdall and fucking Rajcula as the tournament went on. Right, coming into the final, for me, this is where, I guess narratively, if Khan does go on with Damwon to win Worlds, this is an interesting matchup for him to play into. Certainly, Flanders not at his peak, but I will say, like, I don't think Khan's played that many players that could necessarily take him to the limit in this tournament. So I want to know from your side, what do you think the top lane impact will be on the series?
I genuinely think EDG could, like, there's a potential for the EDG to just lose a series entirely from top lane. Like, Canyon and Can to just flex all over Flandre and murder him, because he's still doing, he wasn't doing it early in groups, but he's still doing the things where he like over pushes his lane. It ends up frozen in front of the tower. He can't get it back, and JJ has to come back and fix it. Overextend him for like greedy plates and stuff. Like I feel like Can's got the ability with Canyon in particular to just be looking at Flandre's patterns and just be abusing this guy. But at least Flandre's actually expressed like the ability to play like a lot of the picks at this world. He's actually shown that he's willing to play Kennen, so there's that. They both share like a champion pool, so like Can's not going to be able to just like ocean the other guy, because you know Flandre also plays like Jax and stuff. So you've got that. It's not like there's going to be a champion pool gap, but Flandre's own individual like play and lane and stuff could be really, really exposed.
Right, one thing I think is quite fun going into this final is you obviously have the angle that, like, I'll draw back to a point you'll note the last few years. Some of the analysts that I kind of actually respect more always make, which is they'll always say, they don't just do the whole, like, when we just did like BDD versus Scout, they say mid lane is a 2v2 lane, and it's about the jungle mid synergy. And certainly in this tournament, your jungle mid synergy is back again. It's like the same fucking note we seem to hit almost every Worlds if you go back, right? The question here is, on paper, these should be players who have a chance at least, right, and going against Showmaker and Canyon. So what do you think about EDG in terms of the 2v2?
In mid lane, as long as what do you call he's in like a decent like matchup, Scout, JJ I think should be fine against like Canyon Showmaker. I can maybe see them getting like snowballed against, like, depending on like if they have like a really, really bad draft. I think that's fine. I think what do you call it, Canyon is miles above JJ Flandre. I actually think they're a really bad pairing, they two. I think that's like the biggest, as I was saying previously, that's the biggest one. I actually don't have that much worries about JJ Scout. I think they'll be fine against Canyon Showmaker, failing like they stick Scout on something like Oriana and it's like LeBlanc, like Lee Sin, and he just gets like ran at. That'd be more only like big concern.
Are you heavily favouring Damwon in the final?
Heavily favouring. I'm thinking it in my head like 75-25. Like I think Damwon wins at 75% of the time, and Edward Gaming 25. A lot of it have to do with like drafting and stuff, because if like Can gets like into like a trap of like playing like Jace into Graves, I'd be like more inclined for like Edward Gaming, because if they get Flandre onto champions, that's harder for them to be like exposed onto. I think they're the games they've got a better chance of like winning. But across the board, the winning parts of Edward Gaming, which if I theorise them winning the series, Viper and Mako aren't playing anywhere near as good as Damwon's winning pieces, which I think have been the best at Worlds, Canyon Showmaker. So I think I'd definitely have to go with Damwon Gaming. Yeah.
Right, I'm guessing a lot of other people also going to heavily favour Damwon. I mean, I heard a lot of hype, true, from the LCK enthusiasts where they were like, this is the real final and whoever wins this one. I will just say, I wish there was a lower bracket so we could find out what happens if EDG plays T1, because I beg to differ, but we'll see. What I'll ask is this. Stylistically, you kind of hinted at it there. What type of game should it be if EDG is going to win games or potentially win the series? Like, what type of a game do you think they would win from?
Well, it'd be really nice if Viper gets Aphelios a bunch. I doubt that's going to happen, because
like Damwon permabandit basically against
Yomiushi.
Gumayushi, and then the one game they let it through, they had the long range poke comp to just neutralise it. So, because that's the crazy thing, even though Ghost is just a very mediocre player, he has like he's going to have like a weird effect in this series, where to make Ghost really bad, you're going to want to take Jin off him, and then I think if Viper's playing Jin all series to get Ghost onto like his worst heroes, I don't think that's a winning strategy.
Right.
I think like gimmicking out your own like theoretical best player to attack their worst, I don't think that's a winning strategy, but I think that's what Edward Gaming might end up doing. They might end up like pinching the ADC pool and then getting Viper onto like Jin. I think there's going to be quite a lot of like Jin and MF like contention in this series.
Okay. I mean, I will say that's one area, like I alluded to earlier. I think sometimes people go a little bit too far on the, like, Ghost hate, as it were. Like, we're not literally making it sound like he's some of fucking Chovey's teammates and he just can't play the game. I'll even say, I don't think they necessarily, like, masterminded it this way. But if you look at the champions historically he plays, like, he does play shit like fucking Varus, like, he's playing Jin here. You think of him on something like Ashe, like Senna. Like, he plays the champions. By the way, if I was designing a team around the fucking mid, jungle and top, I want someone playing these, like, as you say, like, to take him off those things if you're going to just take them away from him in the game. Well, look, if you're trying to beat me with your ADC, you've sort of gimped yourself a bit. They're more sort of like the secondary carry champions, and then if you're just banning those champions out, well, fucking good luck with what my mid laner and top laner are going to do.
Yeah, that's the real the real threat of it. I also wonder if like Viper will be able to do the same thing that like Guma done, which was like you threaten on your next best like pick. Though to be fair, Viper has shown like willingness to play like Lucian like Ezreal. I think now that I'm thinking about how many ADCs they would have to ban, because you've also got the Lucian Nami pairing. I actually think if EDG wants, they can almost get Viper like onto a winning matchup like every single game, but you would then have to like give up one of the power picks either to like Canyon or Showmaker. That's where like the problems are like starting. Plus they also have like JJ just playing Jarvan all the time, which is another like weird angle that like EDG's like started to like build around, where they've got like a heavy reliance when Mako's on the enchanters for JJ to be on Jarvan. But I don't know. I think it's really hard game for Edward Gaming, because there's like 3 boxes you have to tick coming in from draft for like for even have a chance in my eyes of you beating Damwon. But we could see.
Okay. By the way, just on an aside, because obviously you're someone who watches the LPL as well. Even though FPX won and IG won, one thing I always stress is even the way they won is almost so indicative of the LPL, because they weren't actually going into Worlds the best teams from those regions, which is kind of wild, right? Like, you look overall, you could make a case that like FPX almost certainly was not considered the best team in the world. Maybe you could argue they were the best in the LPL. IG weren't even the best in the LPL. Like, as everyone knows, RNG always used to beat them. And if it wasn't a meta swap, I mean, there's a world where they just go out in the round of it. They go out in any of the rounds, depending on who they played against. So the interesting thing for me with EDG, and this has actually been a story you'll notice no one picked up on, because people on the fucking League of Legends broadcast are fucking morons. Like, not entirely, like, that's a bit harsh. I'll just say this, they're a bit limited in their ambition, or they have a paucity of creativity and how they think outside the box for narratives. Like, how has nobody stressed that the number 1 seed from LPL, who is the current reigning champion, is in the final and potentially going to win Worlds? That's an enormous storyline. Like, you have to hit that one hard, because this is the difference. Even though LCK has won the We Have the Best Region award for obvious reasons, if you look at how the tournament went and the failure of some of the other LPL teams, if EDG wins Worlds, you can go right back to they have the best team in the world. Like, that's a real thing. And it's not even the case of like, yeah, but just because of the meta, just because of the tournament. Like, in fact, some of the things we've discussed so far, sometimes they're even getting through these series in spite of some of the problems with the meta. So what do you think it would mean for LPL, for EDG to win Worlds if they were to, even if you're saying it's, a 1 out of 4 chance?
I think it'd be like, it would completely recontextualize the whole tournament, because then you'd have to go back and you'd have to look at the RNG EDG series. And even though I think the level
in that series was like really low from both the teams. You'd have to start thinking about you'd have to play as RNG in like these in this worlds, because like that's such a shame because of the shit format that Riot's decided to brainwash us all with. That like RNG has literally only got to play against what do you call it, like Damwon, PSG and EDG and BO5s. We never really got to see them against the rest of the contested field. I would have loved to have seen RNG against T1. I would have loved to have seen RNG against Mad Lions and Gen.G. I think these would have been like great matchups.
Yes.
Because I think you would have revealed so much more information about how you could contextualise what the LPL was sending against the rest of the year. Yeah, even have a look at, I know they didn't make it out of the groups, but LNG, Team Liquid, they had that crazy 3-3-3-3.
Yes.
Would have loved to have seen how LNG would have fared up against like some of the teams in actual like series play.
Yeah,
if Edward Gaming, If Edward Gaming won Worlds, like you were saying, it would be the first time the LPL first seed had like done it, and it would also be the first time that an LPL, which LPL was famous obviously for ADC teams because of like Uzi and the EDG versions of Deft. It'd be the first time a Chinese team has sent an ADC best team and won.
Yes, that's a very obvious, it's a very apt point. And by the way, obviously historically, I mean, this is kind of a boomer take now, like it's been about mid lanes so once you got the Koreans. But obviously historically, their whole region used to just be like Dota. The ADC is the one position, it's the carry, and it was all about, listen, the ridiculous version is if people don't know, this is why you have to know Dota to be able to make interesting MOBA observations. Uzi, you're all just like, he's so egotistical. That is fucking Dota. If you've ever seen Burning, it's 4 Protect 1. He's just like, everyone give me the resources and I will carry this game. So I agree, like, it will be massive historically, even though Viper's not in the best form. Yeah, for the best ADC from the region to go to Worlds and to win, because obviously, if you look in the past, Uzi never did it, Def never did it, Nama did it. You know, you can go down the list. It's just the way it's been. What about this then? One thing I want to ask about in that particular vein is if we get into a scenario where we had a lower bracket like you were talking about before, you can even throw in, as you said, if you think of some of the fun group stage, like for example, who the fuck wouldn't want to see like Rogue with the way that they were playing the group stage being a lower bracket? Because if anyone knows how Dota works, basically this isn't how it works, but I'll just do this for League of Legends brains so as not to completely supernova your mind. Imagine we had the same group stage format, but instead of the top 2 getting out, it's only the 4th place gets disqualified. And what you do is top 2 go to the upper bracket, and then the 3rd one goes to a lower bracket, and maybe we could make it, I'm sort of like doing a scoff version of TI here, you can see. Maybe the lower bracket might even be a best of 1 in the first match or something like that, you know. So as a result, you would have still had Rogue, you would have still had PSG talent. Obviously, hopefully that would have been Fnatic if upsets here in my hypothetical world. That could have been Team Liquid, actually. Who the fuck knows who would have won that one, because obviously didn't play out the tiebreaker for 3rd. You know, there's a whole bunch of teams there that would now all of a sudden be very interesting. And you could not only have one team potentially do a miracle run, LNG I think would certainly have been an interesting candidate depending on who went to lower bracket, but more importantly, as you alluded to before, you can start taking a lot of those quarterfinals teams and you can kind of make your matchups and see what would happen, and there's some that are very interesting, and at a very minimum it will tell you so much more about the regions, right?
It was a great thing about it, because it's one of the things that people like when they talk about like TI, but it's something that like I rarely ever see even expressed in esports. What's a thing I love in upper bracket, lower bracket formats is there's actually a division of metas between the brackets, because in the lower bracket people start drafting more scaling compositions, really like safe, like comfort picks and stuff, because you're on like these do or die games, right, like very high tech stressful like games, and so you actually have this parity meta beginning to form between like the upper bracket teams are just drafting what everyone thinks is the best at the tournament, but when you go into these lower bracket matches, you've got people and doing that, you've got people drafting the wildest stuff to try and catch people out, and it gets even cooler because in Dota, if a top team, right, gets like upset in the upper bracket and they get sent into the lower bracket, now everyone's like looking at them and everyone's having to prep for them, but they've obviously not prepped for being into the lower bracket, and so people can try and like snipe them with like specific strategies and stuff. I actually think how crazy they've gimped this tournament. The Worlds would be I think the best esports tournament if they just introduced some sort of like lower bracket thing. It would be that good. But Riot's just got no implication of like doing it, so we're just going to be stuck with this absolute dog shit gimped version that we have.
Yeah, and I'll also throw in there as well. Anyone who watches TI knows, even though your brain tells you when you see the teams in the upper bracket, like, oh, wow, they've dropped down, but don't worry, they can still go through the lower bracket. Every single fucking time, there are teams that are looking strong in the upper bracket, drop down and get instantly knocked out. And they are just done, like, 5th to 6th, 7th to 8th. And you thought that was a team that, they could come back. It's so rare that, like, the top 4 teams in the upper bracket are the top 4 teams at the end of the tournament. So I also think that would be so interesting in this kind of a format. Like, do you have you already listed one with RNG because obviously stylistically they would be so interested in all the teams. Is there one or two other names in the bracket that you would have been interested to see play someone else specifically or have a chance at a run if they hadn't have played specific team that beat them?
I think but they were just absolutely awful at this tournament. But I wonder if FPX had been given a bit longer time. I don't know how long you would have to give these fuckers because they were really, really shit.
Sure.
Like you need like a quad fucking lower bracket just for them to work out how to gank bot lane. But it would have been interesting to see if they could get their shit together because that would have given you another like threatening like elite team. Because that's another thing that's bad about Worlds. If like one or two of like the supposed like top teams come in bad form, and then your like region's like best team kind of keep their form, well then there's like sometimes only one or two teams actually at a tournament that can rival you or realistically beat you, and it's very, very boring because like the very first round match they just slaughter the team, and then the actual tournament for them starts in semi-final like T1 HLE series. That was a waste of everyone's time just watching 5 body bags play against T1. And then the tournament actually started for T1 against like DK because that fucking series was an absolute waste. I'm trying to think who anyone else would have been like interesting in like a lower bracket. I think Mad would have been pretty. Watching Mad play against the rest of the LPL would have been unbelievably like sick. I think Mad Lions versus RNG would have been brilliant. Oh, C9 as well. To see just to like that's another one. See if like would they call it? Cause that's like a great storyline. Obviously, like Perk being clutch. If you could like make that team like run through the lower bracket where like the pressure games are on people that theoretically are better than him, but he's a lot more comfortable in like those positions.
I mean, I will say, as much as people might think, like, you're going too far by going, what if FPX had more time and more games? If people don't know, the TI format is also way more forgiving in the group stage. Not only do loads of teams make the bracket, but they also give you, like, for example, in this last TI, you play best of 2, so it can go 1-1 or 2-0 to one of the teams, but you play 8 series. So think about that. You can play like 16 games in that scenario. Now, in a scenario where you can play 16 individual games, well, these teams played 6 unless they got to tiebreakers. So, like, that sample size makes all the world of difference, right?
It's unbelievable because you just every single year at TI, there've been 10 TIs and 2 of them have been bad, or like as in like the meta stuff was bad,
right.
And most of the finals for TI are like amazing, or like are usually like very, very, very good, right?
Sure.
Worlds has historically had the finals usually really shit. It's usually like the favourite usually wins it most of the time.
Yes.
Like there's not a lot of times contextually. Sometimes it's not even like that interesting. Like the stylistic matchups and the parity is like very obvious like beforehand. There's like sometimes you're looking at it and you're like, this team could prep this for 3 months and there's not a lot they could really do here. I think they're just like symptoms of the system, and it's expressed by like what basically you get given every single year. Like TI has these unbelievable series, these unbelievable games, amazing grand finals, and Worlds is just, I think there's been maybe like 3 good finals ever.
It's true. I'll also say as well, by the way, when league people do that thing where they comment on TI and they pick up what they don't like, but then they don't apply it to league. So obviously the classic 2 knocks they say is they go 1. The whole fucking year's just about one tournament. Spoiler. Have you ever fucking looked in the mirror? Are you out of your motherfucking mind? Half of you don't even think the LPL counts. You'd have got... Anyway, so I don't want to get demonetized, so I just said that there. Right, and second, I don't think I even get you demonetized. I've said that a million times or something. And then the other one is, they also go, and also it sucks the way that after TI every time, there's all these roster moves. Like, are you fucking fucking pulling my leg or something, mate? Like, if anyone hasn't seen right now, we're literally about to have another one of those mental off seasons where like 3 dominoes have to fall before all the like Western teams just collapse inwards, and then teams that you all like plebs out there are like, they're pretty good, they were third, and I think they'll just build on it. It's like they won't even have that team, like the best players going and he's going elsewhere, and they're gonna end up with some fucking paltry replacement because you guys don't understand business. So no, I think it's an example of also where like it's pretty sweet. I know the games are different, but it's pretty hard to look at TI's format and say this would be bad for League. And even the whole thing of like the whole year's just about that. Like, I don't want League to be like that. You notice I've tried to sort of battle Dom a little bit on the idea that like MSI is meaningless, or like, who gives a fuck about some of the regional splits. Like, I try to do it because I know historically it sucks if you do just have, it's like a one and done at one tournament. But I get why people do it. But to me, I think it's so many of the things from Dota would almost certainly make League a bit better. By the way, just this section alone, people are seething with rage because they're doing that thing, Keire, where like they had a Nintendo 64 and we've just bigged up the PlayStation for 20 minutes. And they're like, how dare you? It's like, so I already know people are like, they're not taking the info in. But obviously, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what do you call it? 1 second. Oh, I just had a point in my head. It was just absolutely, it just jumped straight in my head.
Is it about the format? Is it about what?
Yeah.
The fact that the year's just about one tournament?
Make a comment. I actually like MSI, by the way. I think MSI is a great tournament. It's like only the champion from one team from each of the regions. I don't think Riot meant it because they mean to do anything that's good. Like, I don't think it means anything. These guys could fuck up soup, right? But MSI, I actually think is a great tournament. I actually wouldn't change MSI. If anything, like, that's perfect. Leave that alone. Good job, Riot, right? But Worlds is just so fucking bad. The wildcard section of it's just bad. It's so pitiful in comparison. Even like the crowdfunding like money section of it with the skins. Yes. It's like Riot produces all this content all year round, and they can't get like a battle pass, something to like hype up Worlds and stuff. Like really have it mean something, because obviously in League the player salaries just dwarf the actual winnings.
Yes.
I just think it's so poorly executed for how epic it is.
One thing I thought I would just touch on is like a brief topic. It'll probably be on like an insight or an upcoming topic, because I saw on Twitter, Papa Smithy did one of those essentially like it's essentially like an analytical model or filter, I would describe it as, which is he asked essentially sort of like who makes who out of Canyon and Showmaker, which again, especially when you're talking about, roles that interact so heavily, I find those discussions really interesting, not just because of the insights you get into the players, but obviously it goes without saying, you kind of reveal how you see the roles and how you see the players yourself and what your criteria, what your models are. So on this particular one, obviously, if in history, I mean, fans themselves are not very good at this. Like you see that from the whole Faker Bengi thing. Like it took I think a lot of them are still in denial to this day about some of the Bengi stuff. So where do you come down on the Showmaker Canyon angle? Because I've heard people saying Canyons, like Dom was implying, Canyon might become the GOAT jungler if he wins Worlds. Obviously, people have been very hot on Showmaker. Even the year where Damwon went out in the round of 8, people thought he was a fantastic player. They kind of blamed other people for some of those. So when we take these two players, as much as right now it's impossible to extricate them, how do you see the dynamic? Who makes who's better? Who are they both GOAT content? Where do you come down on this one?
So that I thought about it in my head, but I just didn't want to interrupt you. That's the one bit of major context I would give against these peers. Rookie and Faker, who are the people I would compare them to, who are already at that like level. Never actually had a GOAT contender jungler themselves. They never had like some crazy like elite. And for me personally, I actually think Damwon in 20, I was when they won Worlds with Naguri. I literally think 1, 2, 3 were the best players at the position. Naguri, Canyon, Showmaker were all like the best player at the position, and Faker has had nothing like that, like compared to that at all. Like basically ever in his career. The closest was maybe like you could maybe say Piglet was like something like that at season 3 Worlds, because they had a very, very good one, but he certainly didn't have 2 players. And then Rookie's somewhat the closest, because his, like, obviously the jewel in his crown is his Worlds that he won, and the Shy was also probably the best top laner in the world at that time. But who do I think makes the other? It's actually very, very hard. I think a little bit of the proof of the pudding is always when you get these players and you like have them like separated from each other. But it'd be contextual, because like Canyon plays jungle, so if you gave Canyon Cryan, that wouldn't be fair, because Cryan's a steaming pile of dog shit, and he could make Canyon look terrible even though he might not actually be doing wrong things. It could just be like he's mid lane or fucking things up. Whereas historically, mid lane has almost always got agency within League of Legends, and so like Showmaker could have a very inactive jungler, a herbivore type jungler, but like Showmaker would still be able to express his skills in the game. So I'd be interested to see if Canyon, what would happen. There's a good one. What would happen if Canyon went to Chovy, and we see what that pairing like could happen, or what could be expressed there, because that would be like the real proof of the pudding. We see like what if you give them another elite mid laner, what could he do? Could he make Chovy, give Chovy 2 years of like being like the undisputed like best mid laner?
Yes,
that is the type of thing to think about. So I think you would need to separate like that. Outside of that, how it is now is literally just how you model the game in your head. I think it's Showmaker, because I believe mid lane like is a higher tier role, it's a more expressive role, it is a better role in League of Legends, and so if you're a better player, it's expressed like you've got better agency throughout the game, and so like Showmaker gets more points. He's actually got to physically play against someone, he doesn't have to kill the AI. But like Canyon's just, again, he is an absolutely amazing player. People who are jungle enthusiasts, I can see why they think he's like amazing, because when you watch his POVs, they're absolutely unbelievable. They're so stellar.
Yeah, I would also say even like that's a good one. Like give Canyon to Chovy, and then let's see like does Chovy suddenly become like the dominant force suddenly? Oh no, we can beat him. I'd even give you another one if you want to take one from this tournament. Before this tournament, a lot of people were out on Clid, because I noticed like after the SKT years, people don't really give a fuck about him. But tell you what, give Showmaker Clid. Let's see. All of a sudden, I bet half these people will be fucking sucking Clid stick, telling me how he's the MVP of the tournament. Yeah, I'm very interested. Yeah. I certainly agree on that one. This video was kindly supported by Lagger15, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Skaparen, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Chris, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, a special thanks goes out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask a question for my monthly AMA? Want teasers for upcoming content or interview guests have I done, etc.? Do you want to take part in one of those donated discussions? Well, if you want any of the above and previously mentioned, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skruminati today at the description box link to Patreon.